Hello, SGD Sacred Geometry Decoded. This will be part 13 in the series Science of the Symbols, and we, again, for this episode and focusing on the next few, we're looking at alchemy, or otherwise known as chemistry, but especially ancient metallurgy, which was so important in not only statues, but for instance, swords and shields and weapons. And you don't want, your army or yourself, you don't want a cheesy weapon. And that's why this was so important at the time. So for instance, the development and especially through the creation of swords, it's been up until the katana has been a mastery, excellent, been so important to cultures and to the development of all their armies and so forth. But so now again, revisiting these Stefan Mikkelspacher images where we have the elements, also the gods or the planets there, the forms of the techniques used still in chemistry, tincture, sublimation, solutions, putrefaction, distillation still used now, and how the planets as well, so Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, etc., but also the astronomical or the zodiac signs, which they themselves are connected to alchemical symbols. So before the periodic table, these are alchemical symbols which are around there. We'll go into those more in the future, but this is another Mikkelspacher, and it has the same elements. So what we have is these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sun and moon. Saturn, for instance, but Mercury, always Mercury at the top, Mercury being so important, the prime material as it's called. Azoth of the Philosophers by Dennis William Houck, and Azoth in itself is an important reference because so we see the symbol of the planet Mercury, also the element Mercury, or Hermes, god of weights and measures, and there we see how he's central figure on the top with the caduceus. Standard alchemical imagery, again, the sun and the moon and Mercury, this important element. Now, Azoth, this is called Azoth of the Philosophers. Mercury, considered the first principle of metals, comes from the Arabic word al-zabak, I'm not sure of pronunciation, which means Mercury, and that's considered the essential element of transformation in the Hermetic alchemical tradition. Hermes, Mercury, and again we see the mercurial symbolism. For instance, the older picture of Hermes, which his caduceus is different from the later Roman caduceus, and but still Mercury the god, Mercury the element, Mercury the planet, and Hermes, Hermeticism, god of weights and measures, just like Thoth. Okay, back to these Mikkelspacher illustrations, and now we'll be looking, so focus on this one here, very as above so below, but what is an important feature is Saturn on this figure here, which has a pirate peg leg. Now, other Hermetic alchemical descriptions of the time, what do we have again? It's like they're sort of a bit of a trickery, but you see the leg behind there, but he also is on this peg leg. And what does that mean? So we see the connections. Well, Hephaestus, also known as Vulcan to the Romans, was the Greek god of metallurgy, and he was always shown, or not always, but in the best imagery, was shown to be lame, to have his deformation on his foot, just like these guys here. One of his feet, especially, has gone lame. Lameness is caused by mercury and arsenic poisoning. Mercury, Azoth, or arsenic is an important feature as well here. Now, back to this Mikkelspacher, where we have Venus, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, which are also the gods. So Venus is Aphrodite, Mars, the god of war, Apollo, the sun god, Mercury, the god of knowledge, of travelers, of navigation, of knowledge, science, weights and measures, the moon, which is silver, or Artemis or Diana, the moon, Jupiter or Zeus, or Saturn or Kronos. But these, still basically used as, so in the periodic table now, but these are still the symbols connected with them. So Saturn is lead, Jupiter is tin, The moon is silver. Mercury is mercury, as in mercurial. Mercury is especially important because it's a metal which melts at room temperature, essentially. It's of the metals, it's unique. It stands out. So important. H. Gold, the sun, iron, Mars, the god of war, iron weaponry especially, and copper and Venus. So copper, again, is a beautiful metal, and it has a feminine element. Aphrodite, the god of love, Venus. Mars, the god of war, and hard iron. But lameness caused by mercury and arsenic poisoning. Hephaestus, which has this lameness. Now bronze, where does bronze come in? Bronze is not an element, it is an alloy. It's an alloy of copper plus tin, or Venus plus Jupiter, the planets Venus and Jupiter, or the god, goddess and god, Aphrodite and Zeus. That's where we get bronze from. Now the Uluburun shipwreck found off the coast of Turkey, which is about 1100 BC. They found many ingots in there. So for every 10 ingots of copper, there was 1 ingot of tin. And they were the same weight. Now, 10 parts copper plus 1 part tin equals the best bronze. So Bronze Age, alchemy, metallurgy, science or chemistry, however you want to call it. Now, if we go back even further to at least about 3000 BC, maybe older, the famous Ötzi, the Iceman, found on the Alps. In there now, his copper axe, which has seems to have come from Tuscany, but it's 99.99% purity. Now there we have the analysis of his copper axe, and of the impurities, arsenic is by far the main impurity in there. And so now, if it comes from Tuscany, it didn't have this high level of arsenic naturally. It's been probably added because they understood that creating a copper alloy with arsenic essentially turned copper into an entirely different metal. If you add arsenic to copper, it makes arsenical copper, which is much stronger than just standard pure copper. At least 30%. We're looking at or around 30% harder. So it's apples and oranges almost in a way. So in a lot of these talking about ancient history, when they talk about copper or bronze, and that it's too soft to cut certain things, they never specify that it's arsenical copper. And we see this in ancient history, even going back to Ötzi's time as well. And that arsenical copper, which it's like soft steel versus tempered steel. It's completely different. It's the same material, but the properties of it are so different that it's important to understand. So when you often hear the Mohs hardness scale and people talking about this, no, they're so way off. It's cringeworthy. Arsenical copper or bronze. So if you add arsenic to copper, that's almost like another form of bronze. But even if you add arsenic to bronze, as in bronze made of tin and copper, it makes it harder as well. So you need to specify if it's arsenical copper or bronze copper. For instance, the steam trains, when they made the boilers and because of the pressures and stuff involved, they specified arsenical copper and bronze in the pieces because of it was specified in there. It is so, these need to be incorporated. And again, if you just look at the go to Wikipedia, look at bronze or copper, you're not going to get the full picture. And this is an important element to the understanding. Now you can also, by adding certain elements to iron, such as carbon, you make steel. Iron is an alloy of carbon and steel, and it's or not technically an alloy, I don't think, but what iron is to steel is very different. It's just by adding this impurity into it. If you and then the difference between soft steel versus hard steel, again tempered versus just regular steel, it's really different. And and so it's often they just compare copper with steel chisels. Then to say, well, you can't cut this. Well, it's just not real, because firstly, masons will use a soft steel chisel, which is comparable to arsenical copper or bronze. It's actually closer to bronze, but again, these are important points which are missing, but this is part of the alchemical Hermetic tradition, and what they're encoding in these pictures is actually a very significant level of science, of knowledge. And now, for instance, when they do, these guys who do the reconstructions of, copper, I bang a few times and my copper chisel is bent. Well, soft steel chisels need to be repaired. So steel chisels that are used to drill holes and cut steel, hard stone, is soft steel. It's not tempered steel. If you harden steel and start banging away with it, it's going to shatter. That's sword makers understood the same thing as well, where to use hard versus soft steel. But again, these reconstructions, you can't do it. Well, no. Are you using arsenical copper? Or are you just melting down some copper pipes and then making a chisel out of it? It's much more nuanced than that, and this is actually embedded in these ancient these type of imagery. So it's not just the pure elements; they're also hinting with their references here to a more sophisticated level of understanding, and these need to be incorporated. So why is the peg leg there? Well, as I've showed, there's information and much higher. It's not just pure, it's about practical knowledge, not just about pure theoretical knowledge in there, and also a mixture of other elements in there as well. And so, as above, so below, this Hermetic principle. But Hermes, god of science, god of weights and measures, god of commerce, god of knowledge and construction. And so this, I hope you enjoyed this one, because again, if you look a little bit further and beyond the, sorry to say it, but these Wikipedia level of research where you just find the first thing that you like and then move on. No, it's much more complicated, and much more detail needs to be incorporated and understood into these things. And again, these are measurable, testable, verifiable things. And so, that's one of the aspects of these and to consider. And just like previous parts, the Hermetic tradition, Hermes Trismegistus, goes back to ancient traditions and ancient knowledge, and you need to compare these two, and you need again to think about these in the broader sense, not just the first page Google search, because it's much more complicated than that. It's science. You can't do Wikipedia science. It just doesn't work, and it'll lead you down a bum steer. So anyway, with that, hope you enjoyed, and you can check all these things out. Of course, it's there to be found. And with that, hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.